On today's show, Dillon Brooks is suspended for the Houston Rockets match versus the OKC Thunder. Plus, the Rockets reportedly had mutual interest in Kevin Durant ahead of the NBA trade deadline and how this year's playoffs could either reignite or extinguish those interests. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate all of that support. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. We got a couple different things to talk about on today's show. The first thing I want to get through relatively quickly, and that's the unfortunate news that the NBA ultimately decided not to rescind Dillon Brooks' 16th technical foul that he picked up Wednesday night playing against the Utah Jazz for the technical foul that he was assessed for the unnecessary, excessive contact, whatever, on the leg flail up into the groin area of one of the members of the Utah Jazz. And first and foremost, I want to highlight here, one, I think a couple of these technical fouls have been pretty ridiculous now for Dillon Brooks. And it's going to, first and foremost, it's going to suck not having him available against the Thunder. Doesn't look like the Thunder are slow in their roll. It doesn't look like they're prioritizing rest as we approach the postseason. And so this is going to be a hard-fought game for the Rockets against OKC. And with 5 games left on the schedule, this absolute gauntlet to close out the year, and the 2 seed still not completely locked up, every win matters until you can guarantee yourself that 2 seed overall. And then the Rockets can debate whether they want to rest their own guys, yada, yada, yada. So missing DB hurts in that regard. Still no word on whether or not Fred VanVleet will ultimately wind up playing, because he's been nursing his own set of injuries as well with the knee soreness. So Rockets may not ultimately be at full strength in this game. Now, here's where I want to get into kind of what I feel like is ultimately, I feel like the referees just have a complete double standard when it comes to Dillon Brooks. I feel like his reputation does him a lot of harm when it comes to the officiating decisions. And I want to give a hat tip to Rockets PA announcer Jonathan Sanford, who made a fantastic point on social media the other day after the game about the fact that in the occurrence where the referees went back and reviewed this play that ultimately became a technical foul for Dillon Brooks, they went and they reviewed the play, and they are supposed to be able to review these plays for a proximate foul, all the stupid verbiage that officials use. And the expectation would have been, okay, if officials deem a play unnecessary, excessive, yada, yada, those tend to be the types of calls that warrant a flagrant foul. And in that moment, the leg kick from DB, the unnatural motion, whatever, sure, call it a flagrant one, slap him on the wrist, give the other player 2 shots and the ball. That's fine. Continue on. A flagrant one would not have resulted in Dillon Brooks picking up his 16th technical foul and the subsequent suspension that comes along with it. And so, unfortunately, and this is the big thing here. And God, I wish we had the Podfather Ben Dubose to tear into the officials here for this one, because he would do it probably much better than I could, much more aggressively too. Ben hates the officials, but to me, there's just this level of, I guess, refusal to admit mistakes from the officiating crews and from the referees as a whole, and their overreaction, right, in assessing certain technicals and then refusing to go back and rescind them after the fact, because especially after like the ones the ones from the Suns game, right, where DB got ejected with the little dust up with KD and Nick Richards and got tossed from the game. Those two techs, one of those two should absolutely not have happened, right? You get in a little scrum, a skirmish, cool. Everybody gets one tech, you move on, right? No fists were thrown. There were no fights. Everything dissipated really quickly. That should have been it. But instead, they doubled down on it, and then because it became a national media story, and you had Stephen A. Smith talking about it and all this mess, it just kind of blew up to epic proportions, and then that basically diminished any and all likelihood of the NBA coming back or the officials coming back and saying, you know what, we were wrong. Let's take that back. That's on us. And again, in all of this, there is a level of, DB just needs to be a little bit better. The leg flail one was, again, kind of ridiculous, and it should have never been assessed a technical foul. It should have been upgraded to a flagrant one, if anything. And so I'm not going to sit here and scream conspiracy theory. I'm not. But I do think, because let me rephrase. I don't think it was like a conspiracy theory where the NBA wants to get rid of Dillon Brooks ahead of this matchup with the Thunder because they want to guarantee none of that stuff, right? But what I will say is I do think that NBA officials are incredibly sensitive at times and that they get in their feelings more often than not. And they definitely have biases when it comes to certain players, right? We all know about superstar calls and how the star players get a more favorable whistle. And we know about home cooking for certain teams around the league and how officials can absolutely be influenced by a crowd or an environment or what have you. And I very much believe that Dillon Brooks and the Dillon the villain kind of personality, his approach to the game, his antics, if you will, has definitely earned him a reputation where he does not receive the benefit of the doubt, even though more or less he's kind of been on good behavior with the Rockets. He's not been the same. He's absolutely still Dillon the villain. He is not the same villain that he was in Memphis. But at the same time, the Rockets have definitely embraced that identity of, the team that is not to be effed with at all, right? Ime Udoka leads the league for all coaches in technical fouls. The Rockets as a team in the almost 2 years that Ime Udoka has been here, they lead the league in technical fouls. They lead the league in ejections. This is a team that does not mess around. And if they feel like they're getting screwed either by the officials or messed with, trying to be punked by another team, they will not stand for that. And they will stand up for themselves. And that's kind of the identity that this team has fostered, which is pretty cool at the end of the day. And so you don't want to lose that. But at the same time, losing Dillon Brooks due to a technical foul count of 16, and then each subsequent 2 technicals now will result in additional suspensions is kind of not a great place to be as you're navigating into the postseason. So it's definitely something that the Rockets are going to have to pay attention to and watch as they navigate the rest of this regular season and navigate the postseason. And again, trying to beat the Thunder without one of your best offensive pieces, with your best shooter, and obviously one of your ace defenders is going to be a bit of a tall task. So wanted to highlight here, wanted to share some thoughts on that. But coming up, want to get into the recent report earlier this week that the Rockets and Kevin Durant had mutual interest at the trade deadline and how this upcoming postseason could either reignite those talks or absolutely extinguish those talks. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Look, daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through the day. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in around a pickup after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Look, with these longer days, and sometimes you go through all the, you have activities or even just personal stuff, you're running errands, it can be a lot to deal with, and sometimes you need that little extra boost. That's where 5 Hour Energy helps me out. So head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. Spoiler alert, watermelon. Best flavor available. It's awesome. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your doorstep. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Today's show is also brought to you by Wayfair. Look, spring is here, and that means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full-blown renovation, Wayfair is the best-kept secret for all things home improvement. From small updates like stylish cabinet hardware to major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, Wayfair has quality products for every budget. Their free and fast shipping makes things so easy. No hauling heavy items from the store. It's fantastic. They have top brands like GE and Moan at great prices. Shopping is an absolutely seamless experience, and you can find exactly what you need to fit your space and style. Go to wayfair.com to take advantage of their website. It's easy to navigate. It's easy to find every piece that you'll need. It makes home improvement easy. Get started now again at wayfair.com. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, want to get into this recent report surfacing from Shams Charania on the Pat McAfee show, basically confirming, and we knew these suspicions going into the trade deadline, and we discussed them a little bit here at the show, that there was definitely interest on both sides, Rockets and KD, and whether they should or shouldn't make a deal at the deadline. But Shams Charania digging up this kind of older story and resharing it, I suppose, or confirming these details is the better way to probably put it, that Kevin Durant had mutual interest from a handful of teams ahead of the NBA trade deadline. Those teams include the Timberwolves, the Knicks, the Spurs, the Heat, and of course, your Houston Rockets. That's 5 teams, 5 different sets of interest. Now, of all these 5 teams, the Rockets are clearly the best of the bunch. The Knicks are a close second, but the Knicks would likely have to gut their team pretty heavily in order to facilitate any level of a Kevin Durant trade. Now, I want to discuss this a little further, and I already know, I can see the YouTube comments piling up right now, and Jackson's always trying to trade people on this team, and Jackson never wants to let the roster just sit and grow. Look, I will say, first and foremost, I would love it if the Rockets didn't have to trade a soul, if they could just keep this team the same, if they could keep everybody home and have a homegrown title contender and all the pieces mesh and work beautifully together, and they all live happily ever after and win a title and multiple titles, and Jalen's the alpha scorer and Sengun turns into the next Jokic and all this stuff, right? I would love that. I would love nothing more than that. But do I think that is likely? Absolutely not. I'm a realist. And it's very rare for teams to not have to make trades. What I will say, though, is that there is a level of players that I think on this roster that deserve more time. Players that are more or less untouchable, at least for the time being. And what I will say is, again, this postseason has the opportunity to either reignite these Kevin Durant trade talks or absolutely extinguish these Kevin Durant trade talks. And what I mean by that is the Rockets have had a very clear Achilles heel all season long, and that is their inability at times to close out games. That is the absence of a legit go-to star level scoring option who can just take over a game and get you some buckets when you need it. And I'm not just talking about at the end of games. I'm talking about those little 2 to 3 to 5 to sometimes 6-minute scoring droughts that the Rockets go on because they are unable to manufacture points, because they're unable to find a way to keep the scoreboard chugging along. They have all the other makings of a legitimate title contender. Their defense is legit. Their identity is legit. The culture is fantastic. They've got an abundance of young, exciting talent. They've got a head coach who knows what he's doing. But unfortunately, that is kind of the one piece of the puzzle that has been missing. And of all the young talent on the roster, the 2 names in particular that are closest to potentially taking on that role at a full-time scale, not a couple games here and there, whatever, are obviously Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. This playoff series, this postseason, in fact, because I'm not just going to say playoff series, hopefully it's multiple rounds of the playoffs, right? This will be a fantastic test for the youngsters on the Rockets, and in particular, Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. Because when I tell you that this Rockets team, despite with all the success that they've experienced this season, if they are eliminated in the playoffs simply because one of or neither of those guys, whatever, if they don't have a guy that can elevate himself in the postseason, hey, it doesn't have to be one of those guys. Maybe it's Amin Thompson. Hell, maybe it's Jabari Smith Jr. or Tari Eason. It doesn't have to be one of those guys. But what they need is they need somebody who is able to. They need multiple people to be able to rise and elevate in the playoffs, obviously. But for this postseason, if the Rockets have one player, elevate themselves to a level where they can be that reliable go-to scoring option, where they can handle those crunch time buckets, where they can keep the scoreboard moving without those scoring droughts, if that question can be answered this postseason, then there's not a world where you need Kevin Durant at all. And I understand the mentality from the subset of fans who just want to give this young core time to grow and coalesce and run it back next season and essentially see what happens or what changes. But unfortunately, that's not how things work. And the reason I say that's not how things work is because timing is everything in the NBA. And at this current stage, with where the Rockets are at, with different contracts kicking in and extensions and having to pay certain guys and other guys potentially coming off the books, there are going to be options to potentially improve this roster that don't necessarily require parting with either of Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun in order to improve things. And I want to talk about what that would look like, what a potential Kevin Durant trade could look like. Ideally, the only version of a Kevin Durant trade that this team should be looking at. I want to talk about that here coming up in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Open Phone. Look, running a small business means you're wearing a lot of different hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where Open Phone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second that you hang up. And if you miss a call, absolutely no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba, openphone.com/lockedonnba for 20% off of 6 months, openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Okay. So the point that I want to make here to wrap up this discussion and revisiting these trade rumors as it revolves around Kevin Durant, I should say, because the Suns are going to look to move Kevin Durant as soon as the offseason's officially here. The Suns are in a bad spot, and it's getting worse and worse by the day, which is good for the Rockets, because then that Phoenix Suns 2025 pick gets even better and better. But here's the thing. If the Rockets are able to navigate this postseason and look really solid doing it, and they're able to have success in the first round and have, at least like a competitive second round series, right, where maybe there's a couple things that they fall short on, but by and large, like Jalen looks good and Sengun looks solid, and, maybe they lose a couple games for this, that, or the other reason, then cool. Run the whole thing back next year. No problems, no issues whatsoever. Maybe you make a couple tweaks to the roster, but no big swings, right? Just give the young guys another year to grow and come together. The dilemma here is, though, if the reason that the Rockets ultimately lose in the postseason is the same reason that they've lost so many games this year, is that they do not have a go-to scorer, that they do not have a star-level player that can take over games, it's not exactly easy to go get one of those guys. They don't exactly grow on trees. And the benefit here with the Kevin Durant situation could very simply be a bridge to either one of the young players for the Rockets actually growing into that role without having to wait for another year or 2 years or 3 years before said player is ready to ultimately take that mantle. Essentially, Kevin Durant could be another stopgap for this Rockets team. Committing to Kevin Durant, bringing him to Houston, and he is eligible for a 2-year, $120 million extension this offseason. So trading for KD, any team that moves for KD this summer is likely going to ink him to that extension, assuming he's on favorable terms and he wants to be wherever he gets traded to. Whatever team gets him will have him for 3 more years. And KD's game is going to age pretty beautifully, right? He's a shooter. He's putting up still phenomenal numbers. He's still a top 10 player in the NBA. He's still a top 10 scorer. His defense has slipped a little bit, but the Rockets have more than enough pieces to put around him to where that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. Where I come away with is I'm actually at the stage regardless of how this postseason ultimately looks, unless it's just an absolute disaster class, right? Like if the Rockets get swept in the first round or something, then maybe you need some big changes, right? Maybe the Rockets were a little fraudulent if that happens, but I don't think that will. I'm at the stage where as long as the Rockets look relatively competitive, right? They win a first round series, competitive second round, whatever. Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun have earned the right to being untouchable. I think they've done more than enough this season and led this team far enough this year that they deserve one more year together, right? This is going to be their first year, their first taste of playoff basketball. And again, unless it ends in absolute disaster, right? Like one of them just completely lays an egg, looks awful in the postseason, whatever. Aside from something like that happening, which I think is a very slim chance, then I think they both deserve the chance to run it back next year and see if they can grow and improve across another regular season, a third year with Ime, another taste of postseason basketball, because this is going to be the first taste of playoff basketball for a lot of guys on this roster. That being said, if the Rockets feel like they don't have that 1A guy on their roster after this postseason, I don't think they're just going to stand pat and not make any moves this offseason. And Kevin Durant could very much be viewed as a stopgap type piece, the exact same way that Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks were brought in to be kind of the training wheels for this team. They were brought in to bridge the gap from being the worst team in the NBA to being one of the best teams in the NBA all of a sudden. And I really wasn't expecting, I kind of don't expect either of Fred VanVleet or Dillon Brooks to realistically still be on the roster when the Rockets are actually vying for titles. Maybe they will be. But what I will say is that there is a unique timing element at play here, where this offseason, the Rockets have one contract on the books that is sizable enough to be able to move for another max contract, and that is Fred VanVleet's deal. If you don't make a move using Fred's contract this offseason, right? Whether you keep Fred, whether you decline the option and renegotiate a more team-friendly deal with him, whatever, regardless, if you don't do something with Fred's deal trade-wise this offseason by picking up that option and then dealing him either in this offseason or trading him at the trade deadline, you lose your biggest contract when it comes to trading for a potential star player. And then, guess what? Your next 2 biggest contracts, the 2 most sizable contracts on the roster, that one of them is going to have to be included for any potential star move, it's going to be one of Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun. That is the timing angle that I am trying to impress upon fans who don't necessarily understand that, yes, this team is going to have to make some hard decisions this offseason, or they're going to have to make an even harder decision down the line. And so as it currently stands, the one trade package that I would actually love to see on the table, given everything that we've seen this season, the body of work, where this team is at, where we think they're headed in the future, if you could cobble together a trade of Fred VanVleet, Cam Whitmore, salary filler, and then that 2025 Phoenix Suns pick, and maybe, very slim maybe, one more Suns pick on top of it. For Kevin Durant, I think you do that trade in an absolute heartbeat. Because this Rockets team showed that Jalen and Amen have grown considerably as primary. It's not going to be perfect if they're running the offense full time and if Fred VanVleet is, Thanos snapped out of existence. But they're capable of doing. And they're only going to get better the more and more reps that they're going to have. Reed Shepherd is waiting for his time to shine. He's waiting in the wings. And he can easily take on some of those additional ball handling reps as early as next season. And that can be your trio of ball handlers and maybe still some spot minutes for Aaron Holiday here and there next year, right? And then if you're able to pull that trade off and bring in Kevin Durant and run out a starting lineup next year of Amin Thompson, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Kevin Durant, and Alperen Sengun, and you're still bringing the Aries off the bench, Jabari and Tari, along with Reed Shepherd, and potentially keeping Steven Adams in the mix, that is a team that is a legitimate title contender from day one in the NBA. That is a team that suddenly is still going to be a top 5 defense, still has a bunch of young players with tons of room to improve, and has now added a top 10 player in the NBA, one of the most legit, probably maybe one of the best, if not the best, most seamless scorer of all time in Kevin Durant. And the beauty of it is they wouldn't need KD to be their A1 every single night. They wouldn't. It's not like the version of this Phoenix Suns team where they need Book and KD and Beal to just cook every single night because they don't know how to play defense, because they have no cohesion on that side, because there's no chemistry, because that locker room is just defunct and destroyed. Not the same situation. And KD, I'm fully invested in the idea that he can still play defense at a very high level when motivated, but where's the motivation with that Phoenix Suns team, right? It's non-existent. So if you could make that deal this summer, if that's all it took to add Kevin Durant to this roster, would be Fred, Cam, maybe a little bit of salary filler thrown in there if that's not enough. I think you would need maybe a little bit more on top of whatever those two guys are making. So like maybe throw in like Jock Landale or something. So Fred, Cam, salary filler, the 2025 Phoenix pick, wherever it may land, which as it currently stands, it is sitting at still 12th best lottery odds. And that's the other element of this discussion, is if that Phoenix pick jumps up into the top 4, if it rises up at all in the lottery, then that gives the Rockets even more leverage, even more bargaining power in any trade discussions with the Suns. Because look, Suns are screwed, and they're going to have to come to the table and deal with the Rockets at some point. And if you are confident that one of Jalen or Sengun or Amin Thompson can truly be the Rockets' 1A star down the line, which of those three, being completely honest, I think Amin Thompson has the best chance to become that player for the Rockets, but he's still probably like a year or two away from really blossoming, especially on the offensive end, into that type of player. Kevin Durant would be the absolute perfect stopgap. You bring in KD, you don't pay that much to get him, you keep all the other young core intact, and you let KD be your closer, you let him be your assassin at the end of games for a couple years, and then you don't even have to last the whole 3 years. If he's on the final year of his contract and you want to trade it, use that $60 million as expiring salary, or trade it and just get rid of it, whatever, cool. There's options down the line. But to me, that sounds like an incredibly enticing avenue for the Rockets. And because we know that there's mutual interest there, because we know that Kevin Durant has so many links to this Houston Rockets team, existing relationships up and down the roster, Ime Udoka, Royal Ivy, Jeff Green, Steven Adams. He's worked out with Jabari and Jalen. He loves Alperen Sengun. There are too many connections, and it's staring me in the face. And you might not like it, but when I tell you to brace for the rumors and the reports and all the noise that the Rockets are potentially going to pursue Kevin Durant this offseason, get ready for it. It's coming. It might not have to happen if the Rockets really prove themselves in the playoffs, and maybe they're going to be content to just make no moves this offseason, but I do not expect the Fertittas and Rafael Stone to sit on the success of this season and say, you know what, we're going to run it back, same exact squad as next year, we got this, simply because other teams aren't going to do that. Other teams are going to make moves, other teams are going to improve, and the Rockets don't want to become this next iteration of the Sacramento Kings, where the Sacramento Kings were the 3 seed, they looked really good, they ran back the exact same squad the next year, and they were a disappointing mess, right? Success is not a lengthy visitor, and you need to be able to capitalize on it when it's available. And again, this offseason presents a very unique opportunity to do so, and as long as the reports and the rumors and the interest are there, then we're going to have to keep talking about it on the show. So I'm sorry if you're somebody that's completely burnt out on these discussions, but that's kind of where it all lays. Those are my thoughts on the situation. I'm curious your thoughts. Let me know how you feel about Dillon Brooks and the officials. Let me know how you feel about the reported interest and the Kevin Durant scenario. And would you do that trade, the trade that I proposed? Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.